Welcome to the Justice Journal podcast. I'm Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert. I hope you enjoy this podcast series where we discuss important public safety issues and provide insight into who we are as an office and what we do both in the courtroom and in the community to provide the highest level of public safety through prosecution, prevention, and innovation. Okay, everybody, welcome to this episode of our special COVID-19 series of our Justice Journal podcast series. I'm Anne Marie Schubert, District Attorney for Sacramento County, and I will be hosting today a discussion about what we can all do during this pandemic, specifically as it relates to child abuse and child prevention. And that's really in particular, especially because of the school closures, as well as the various public health orders that require people to stay at home. I'm honored today, really, to have a number of people that have spent really their entire careers out on the forefront trying to protect our children in our community. Start off by telling you who's here. We've got Dave Gordon, who is the Superintendent of Sacramento County Office of Education. Sheila Boxley, who is the President and the CEO of the Child Abuse Prevention Council here in Sacramento. We have Michelle Callejas, who is the Director of the Sacramento County Child, Family, and Adult Services. And we have from the Sheriff's Department, Law Enforcement, is Detective Christie Hirota. And from our office, here in the DA's office, we have Don Bladet, who is our Assistant Chief Deputy over our Family Violence Unit, which specifically includes child abuse. So thank you all, first of all, for joining me today. Okay, so let's just start off to give folks in our community a little bit of background about what everybody brings to this table in terms of their services or what they do. So Dave, if we can start with you and kind of give us a sense of what you do and how many districts there are and how many kids are served in Sacramento County.
Yes, good afternoon and thanks for having me. We have in Sacramento County 13 school districts and we serve around 240,000 K through 12 children. The county office provides direct teaching services to many special education children in our court and community schools, and a variety of other career and technical education programs. And then we support all of our school districts and the community in providing top quality education.
All right, great. Thank you so much. And Sheila, I've known you for a long time in your role with CAPC. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Child Abuse Prevention Council does and the services you provide?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Our real focus is on prevention of child abuse and neglect. And we do that through some direct services and activities, as well as through training and referrals and a variety of other kinds of supports. Notably in Sacramento County, we're part of, and we are the backbone agency for the 9 family resource centers that provide really the greatest amount of prevention services that go on in our county. And so there is a range of things that we're able to do, including parent education and including emergency supports that families need.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sheila. And Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about your responsibility with Sacramento County and the Director of Child, Family, and Adult Services?
Sure. So Child, Family, and Adult Services includes Child Protective Services, Adult Protective Services, in-home supportive services, the Public Guardian Conservator's Office, as well as our public authority. For purposes of this podcast, Child Protective Services responds to allegations of abuse and neglect. We have a 24/7 hotline. We investigate. We do our best to try to keep children with their families when it's safe to do so. When we do have to take them into protective custody, we're immediately focused on mitigating the risk and safety issues that brought them to our attention to get them back home.
All right, great. Thank you, Michelle. And Detective Hirota, can you tell us what you do with the Sheriff's Department?
Yes, thank you. I'm on the Sacramento County Sheriff Task Force, and specifically it's the Sacramento Valley High-Tech Crime Task Force. And we are the regional, parents, you can say, for our area. In California, there's 5 task forces that specifically do internet crimes against children. And we work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and I will refer to it as NCMEC from here because it's a little bit easier. Okay. We work with them in getting cyber tips with regards to children that are talking to predators or people that are downloading images of child porn, or children who are victims and are actually being victimized by maybe somebody that they know. So that would be a production of child porn. So we investigate those types of crimes as well, and we obviously help the public in providing them information such as today to figure out how to be safe.
All right, great, thank you. And Dawn, can you tell us a little bit about your bureau, as we call it, that you oversee in the DA's office?
So the Family Violence Bureau includes a number of units of the District Attorney's Office, including child abuse and cyber crimes, adult sexual assault, elder abuse, and human trafficking. So each of those units has what we call vertical prosecution, meaning that the deputies handle cases because they are considered serious from the inception all the way through jury trial and sentencing. So they specialize in these areas.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so today, the purpose of today is, I think, a realization amongst all of us that we are in very unique times, extraordinary times, hopefully unprecedented times, and we have some unique challenges, specifically when it deals with child abuse and child abuse prevention. And so the goal of today's podcast really is to kind of come at it from all of our different angles, to do whatever we can to really raise awareness to our community about how we can continue to protect children even in these extraordinary times. So Dave, if I can start with you from a school perspective, and we all know that school closures have occurred across this country. Children have gone to remote learning for the most part. So I want to kind of put a two-part question to you. One is as it relates to school teachers and school districts, and then the second would be as it relates to children. But starting off with teachers and districts, how can somebody go about, whether they're a teacher or district or somebody that works for a school district, how can they continue to do their job as protecting children during these times?
Great question. And let me start by saying the relationships between teachers and the families they serve, and particularly the children they serve, are more important in these times than ever before. There are many things, and we hear of it all the time, that teachers can do to connect with young people. Virtually all of our districts are doing distance learning, remote learning in some way, but through Zoom calls with the families, through phone calls with the families and young people. We're hearing of all kinds of creative ways that teachers are connecting with young people, up to and including, we just heard a story yesterday about a teacher who went out to sing happy birthday at the curbside for one of the students in their class because they felt that the student was struggling because of lack of connection with the class and the classmates, and particularly the teacher. Teachers are still mandated reporters of child abuse and neglect, and there are ways to continue to detect trauma even over the phone and even remotely. But I think it's particularly important now that people in the community, friends, neighbors, others, be on the lookout for signs of child abuse. Michelle Callejas, I know, will be talking about this further in terms of reporting, but there is a child abuse hotline, and it has a text feature as well, 916-875-5437, which anyone can report suspected instances of child abuse, including young people. So now more than ever, everybody's got to be vigilant. It used to be the teachers saw kids for so much of the day, but now we all do.
Right. So what about kids? I mean, I have a young child who's in elementary school, and he's doing remote learning, and he's doing his Zoom calls. And I'll give a shout out to his teacher because it's been extraordinary how much outreach there's been by the districts. But if you had a student or a child that unfortunately was the victim of something during this time, how would that student, how can they report in terms of, is there some avenue through the districts that they could do that, or their teachers?
Not so much through they could contact the teachers, but a lot of times children are reluctant to turn in others, and they want to do it anonymously. And there are ways to do it through the hotline that I mentioned. There's also a support hotline called The Source, which is sponsored by the county. And that number is 916-787-7678. And that number is also accessible by text. And we would encourage young people talk remotely all the time,
Right.
even while the schools are closed. So we would encourage parents and families to be on the lookout for signs, and you can report in.
All right. Thank you, Dave. All right. Sheila, how about you with the Prevention Center? What has been your kind of traditional mode of people reporting things, and what are we doing kind of new and different now?
Well, these times have forced us all to be very innovative and creative in the ways that we do things. We're very concerned because we know that one of the primary risk factors for child abuse is isolation, and families are isolated. And likewise, the isolation sometimes prevents the person being abused from being able to have contact to get any support. So one thing that we are doing is we do have an open line. It is only open during normal business hours, but that number is 916-244-1906. And anyone can call into that number if you're looking for services or supports. It will be a direct link to getting people referred to the family resource centers in 9 areas of our county. And even for simpler things like new or expecting moms to have a crib delivered to them, or food to be delivered to them, or all sorts of other needs that they might have, including referrals to some really serious trauma and crisis supports. And I'll give you a quick story. It's gone viral, but one of our stellar AmeriCorps members got a referral for a mom with 2 older kids who was pregnant, homeless, in really dire straits. And in a 24-hour period, had a crib for the baby, had a place for her to live that was subsidized, and was able to start giving her primary types of support and training. And likewise, one of the things that we've seen that people may not think about is that there are parents whose children are now in the system, and they are trying to obey the kind of mandates that the courts have given them so that they can reunite. So another thing that's happening through the family resource centers and parent ed is that they're doing one-on-one training with these parents so that they can get through the training and the children can be reunited. So there are a variety of innovative things, including other kinds of home visits that are now done through Zoom or FaceTime and so on, and typically have an opportunity through those visits to speak directly with the children as well.
Okay. One thing I asked you, I think, about yesterday, Sheila, is you guys, the Child Abuse Prevention Center has a Facebook page, right?
Yes, we do.
And so and the same would be true for anybody else here, but if somebody wanted to reach out to you, could they do it through some social media platforms like Facebook?
They certainly can. We do have the Facebook account. People can go on that. They can go on the website, and someone will respond to them typically within a few hours.
Okay, great. Good to know. All right, Michelle, how about with Sac County and CPS?
Yeah, so we are currently maintaining most of our operations for purposes of immediate safety risk issues. We are still conducting face-to-face investigations regarding allegations of abuse and neglect. And we do the COVID screening questions both at our hotline as well as when our social worker goes out into the field. We ask the family again. We provide them with masks and gloves as they go into the homes. They make contact with everyone in the home. They still do the home inspections to make sure things are safe, interviewing the kids. With respect to the completing the investigation, we're doing those more once the safety issues are mitigated, doing those more virtually, following up with resources the family may need. For monthly face-to-face visits, our social workers are required to see kids and families on a monthly basis. They're continuing those. They're still doing some face-to-face, but they're also doing many virtually, Zoom, Skype. They've been very creative, as I think everybody else has during this time. The really stressful part for our children and families is the family visitation time. You can imagine the trauma everyone has experienced when a child has to be removed from the home. And so they really cherish the times that they get to spend with their siblings, their parents, their grandparents. Right now, that's all being done virtually. I have to give a shout out to our foster family agencies who are also navigating through this with their foster parents or resource parents. They're also doing Zoom, Skype to ensure that children and their families at least get to see each other.
Right.
And then I would say to Sheila's point, this is a time to really highlight our agencies in our community that provide the safety net services. That this is a particular need where we rely on our family resource centers, our community incubator leads within our community to connect with our families, to meet needs that have emerged, such as food, clothing, basic necessities that we're like, wow, we usually don't get calls on this, but we're responding and referring them out. And then I'd like to reiterate Dave's point that right now it's a time for our community to reach out and connect with families that may be more vulnerable. So see if they need support. And then absolutely, if it's something more concerning, please call our child abuse and neglect hotline. It's 875-KIDS, KIDS, or 875-5437, should there be any suspicions of harm being done to children.
You used a couple words I'm not familiar with. Community incubators. What does that mean?
So we have this great effort in our community that is the backbone agency is the Sierra Health Foundation, and the whole focus is on reducing the disproportionate number of Black child deaths in Sacramento County. Black children die at 2 to 3 times the rate as other children. And so this has been an ongoing, tremendous effort. Agencies that are providing services with probation as part of the team, CPS as part of the team, and human assistance to ensure families' basic needs are being met, benefits, as well as strengthening families by promoting protective factors.
Okay. All right, Michelle. Thank you. All right, Christy, how about from the law enforcement perspective? I would imagine that this stay-at-home order is causing even more challenges, I would say, for kids in protecting them.
Well, especially because you said it, your child's being homeschooled themselves right now. So
Right.
I think that kids who normally are not on the internet as much, because people are in kindergarten, so they're 5 to 10 years old, and they're using their devices a lot more than they normally would.
Right.
So parents didn't probably have that opportunity to have that talk if they wanted to, because they kind of just got thrown into giving their kids devices because they are homeschooling. And then kind of like you mentioned too before, the kids are wanting to reach out to their friends and socialize. And so they're, again, using their devices a lot more than they would. So I think that just in my experience in talking to my friends, the struggles in trying to balance that with your child between doing schoolwork and playing games and communicating with their friends. So probably the first thing that a lot of parents need to do is they just need to sit down and have a conversation with their kids about giving them those devices and using social media. I oftentimes like to compare it to, when you have your kids learn how to drive, you're not just going to give them the keys, or when you teach them how to skate or have them go outside, you give them all these rules. And I know oftentimes parents forget about doing that with devices. So talk to your kids about the dangers, and of course you can make it age appropriate. And when they're young, just give them some basic information, like don't talk to people you don't know. Don't be friends with people that you don't know on face to face. And then we recently had a case where this applies. Don't be friends with people that you don't know personally who have mutual friends with you, because that oftentimes becomes an issue. A really big case that at some point we can talk about, because there's so many valuable lessons with this case. And then also, tell kids not to take photos of themselves. It seems so simple. We've got cases where, kids as young as 8 years old are sending, sexually explicit images. So just sit down and have a conversation. And obviously the younger they are, you want to keep your devices, if you can, in a common area so that you know what they're doing. And then you have to remember too, since people are home, the predators are home, and this is like a great time for them just to keep out there and throw fishing lines out there and find a child who might be isolated or who might be depressed, and start talking to them and making them feel really good, and then have conversations that are not acceptable. So I think you just talk to your kids and think about some of dangers out there. And we do have resources. Like I said earlier, we work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So they have a division that specifically does presentations called NetSmarts, and that's with a Z. And they have PowerPoints, and they've got brochures that are all age appropriate for kids and also for parents and educators. Another thing to think about too is if your kids are talking to their friends and you notice in the background there's something unusual, like some shouting, or you just noticed a lot of times that the child might be acting a little bit different, you can always report for a child too, since I know Dave was talking about, reporting, if you have an opportunity to tell somebody yourself because one of your kids' friends are in a bad situation because they're not reaching out to their, or not having access to their coaches or their teachers or their, dance instructors. So,
one of the things that somebody mentioned to me the other day, I think we talked about this when we did the domestic violence podcast, was, using code words or something like that. If you're using your social media, a lot of kids are on TikTok nowadays.
yes.
And, one of my relatives said that some kids are actually encouraging other kids to use code words to let them know that they're in trouble. Is that something that you would have seen or recommend?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. Just like when you probably told your kids when you have them get picked up from school, if somebody runs up and says, hey, it's an emergency, your parents told me to come get you. I've had a code word with my child. So that's a great idea, Anne-Marie, to bring that up to your kids if there's a word, and they can even have a code word with their friend as well, too, or their family. So that's an excellent idea. The other thing, too, is with your kids, just I know that they're getting kind of addicted. Have you noticed that? They kind of have that addiction with the phone because they missed a phone call from their little friend and the world's going to fall apart. So that's another issue that parents are going to have to deal with is how their kids are getting addicted. So again, you're just going to have to set the rules with your kids right up front and tell them these are the rules. And obviously, the younger they are, the more reins you're going to have on them. Tell them that you're going to have to see what they're doing, make sure that they're in a room that you can hear and see what they're doing. So that way you can kind of monitor, don't have them run off. And the other big thing too is the kids, don't let them go to bed with their devices. After a certain time, if you have to turn off your Wi-Fi, because that's where the predators are. You don't have to, and I always love using this scenario, you don't have to have the boogeyman knocking on your window anymore because you've got these devices in your rooms and people from all across the world can access your child. So there's no real good reason to have your devices in your bedroom.
Yeah, very good advice. Very good. All right, Christy, thank you. Dawn, how about from the DA's perspective? I know last week when we did the domestic violence Zoomcast, I call them now, we talked a lot about how the court system has changed and how are we as an office addressing those changes. And maybe you can just kind of walk us through what's changed and how does it apply to kind of specifically to child abuse types of cases?
Sure. So a lot has changed because there are closures in effect for the Sacramento County Superior Court. So a lot of trials are not happening right now, but a lot of critical proceedings are happening, and proceedings are happening virtually. So what happens now is that for arraignments, the early stage of the proceeding, and preliminary hearings, one of the first hearings that happen in a criminal case, those are still taking place. They're just taking place a little differently. They're online now on YouTube. There are court channels for each of the superior courts where you can see the hearings and the calendars take place. So if people are, if someone is a victim or affected by a case, we can help give them access to court that way. Cases are still being prosecuted. Cases are coming in. People are getting arrested. So if there is a report, they're still being investigated. Child abuse cases are still being referred to our office. We're still filing them. We're still issuing warrants. People are being picked up and entering through the criminal justice system to be held accountable for those crimes. So we are still in business in that sense. The cases are moving slowly because of the court closure, but they are moving. There are a variety of changes that have happened in the bail system, but most child abuse crimes, bail has remained in the general vicinity that it was before the court closure. So we have tools at our disposal. One of the biggest assistants we have are our victim advocates. We have a great team of victim advocates who work with all of our families affected by child abuse. They are still monitoring the phones. They're all still working full time. They're just working from home. They're making phone calls. They're processing applications for victim services and which means setting up counseling and setting up benefits for people who are in need because of a case involving a crime that affects a child. And we're still doing SAFE interviews, which are the multidisciplinary interviews where children are being interviewed. We're just doing them on a more limited basis, but those also are happening. So there are a number of kind of creative ways that we've had to adapt during the court closure, but the system is still working. The system is still in place. And that's why it's so important now more than ever that if you see a child in some kind of harm's way, or you know that a crime has happened, that you report it, because it will still be investigated and it will still come to our office.
Okay, all good advice. Okay, the next area that I kind of want to just go into, which many of you have already mentioned, but fair to say that we cannot protect children without the help of our communities, especially during this time. Really, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. So, part of the reason, to be honest, that we're doing this Zoomcast, as I call it, is because we want to raise awareness, right? Especially in this time. So let me just kind of throw some questions out there. Michelle, what would you say in terms of our community engagement? What is the most important thing during this time period to help protect kids?
I think right now this highlights the issue that child safety cannot rest with child protective services alone. Right. We absolutely rely on our community. And by far the majority of calls that we receive are from our mandated reporters, our teachers, our counselors, coaches, pediatricians. A lot of kids aren't going just to their basic well exams because they're just focusing on more critical issues. And so now more than ever, we need the eyes of the community. I think it's important for folks to realize that unless they're mandated reporters, they can be anonymous. So if people are hearing some stuff going on next door, and the family's been struggling, please call. People don't have to know or have evidence that there is abuse taking place. They have to suspect. We'll come out, we'll do the questioning. We will protect the name of the person that made the call. It'll be anonymous. We don't tell the families who called. But right now, and if I could just add, the domestic violence podcast was great, very informative. And one of the things that Chief Hahn said just heightened my awareness is, they've seen such an increase in domestic violence calls, as well as calls regarding mental health issues. The three top risk factors for our agency is domestic violence, substance use, and mental health issues. So as we see our families escalating in these other areas, our kids are at higher risk. So we really need the community right now to kind of step up and reach out to support each other, but absolutely call if they believe a child or youth is being harmed.
One of the things I've said many times is just because crime is not reported doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yep.
And now, especially more than ever, especially because kids are in remote learning, the opportunities for mandated reporting, I assume, have lessened.
Yeah.
So thanks for those tips. Dave, what would you say from a school perspective?
I would echo a lot of what Michelle just said. If you see or know a child that's lonely, that's sad, that's beginning to disconnect, or who is afraid, please get them some help. Either call within yourself or talk to family members, other people in the community. But I think it's really up to all of us. Many of our teachers, when school closed, have given their phone numbers to their children. That's not their job, but they care. I just heard a story the other day. Mrs. G got a call at 9:30 at night from a fourth grader. I miss you, Mrs. G. Now that child was not in danger, but it's a feeling of loneliness. I miss you. So we need to jump on those things. And another thing I've done with my colleagues is I try to call 3 friends or colleagues a day just to check in. This is a hard time for people. How are you doing? How's your family? What's going on? And I think just people reaching out and doing something as simple as that, and making sure people are in touch with their kids can make a big difference. So it's really up to all of us.
Very good point. How about you, Sheila?
Well, it's interesting because I think we all hear people saying, gee, I wish I could do something. Or perhaps we hear people saying that they have more time now, and maybe an alternative to Netflix, and some of those other things is that perhaps they can indeed be a part of the prevention strategy. And that is very much like what Dave said about contacting people, talking with them, asking them how they are, checking in regularly. And even doing things like I know of a retired school teacher who volunteered to help online with some kids in their distance learning and give the parents a little bit of a break doing that. Other things that I've heard people do is putting together little care kits, whether it's nice things like toiletries and lotions and so on, or whether it's games and things for the kids to do. And there certainly are a lot of those things on the web, which of course parents should be monitoring, but making sure that you have the contact with people and the contact directly with the children. In part, that's great for the kids. It certainly is, but it is also a relief to the stress on the parents who are in a 24/7 situation. And so whether it's the grandmother, whether it's the neighbor, I've heard of church congregations who have made a point of having lists and call-ins to really connect with people to make sure everybody's being contacted and not isolated. So it really is the truth that everybody can do something and be part of supporting these kids and families right now. And Prevent Child Abuse America has what I think is a really very good tagline. And they say, during this time, especially this time, and especially you, that each of us have some responsibilities to be reaching out to other people. And I think we need to look toward our neighbors, our friends, people that we probably think are doing just fine, maybe having a lot of stress. They may have another family member who's been impacted by the virus. They may have lost their job, all sorts of things that are causing additional stress. And having that social connection is a really key protective factor for families and children. So we really encourage that.
All right, Sheila, thank you so much. How about you, Dawn?
I think that's the message is stay connected, reach out in every way you can, make sure that kids are being seen, even if we can't visit the way that we traditionally do. Make sure that we're checking in or noting when they're absent, when they're not turning in homework, when they're not present at the Zoom, making sure that if kids haven't heard from friends or you haven't talked to neighbors, that you're just out there making a conscious effort to help one another right now when everyone is feeling very isolated, and kids, of course, are the most vulnerable in that situation.
Absolutely. All right, Christie, with you, one special question really is, what should somebody do if there's an urgent need, if somebody needs law enforcement help urgently?
Well, of course, call 911. And you can also text 911 if you obviously are in a situation where you want to try to be a little bit more secretive. If you're trying to, protect yourself from getting any further abuse, you can always do that. And or you can call any of the local law enforcement agencies. They have non-emergency numbers if you don't feel that it's an absolute necessary reason for you to call 911. And then with the National Center, if you go online, you can do a report, or you can call, which is 1-800-THE-LOST. And anybody can call, a child can call, a parent, neighbor, anybody. And those will get, if there's a priority call, they will get those to us right away because we are on call 24 hours a day. So we will definitely get that. It's not going to get pushed into a queue and, not be seen for, 30 days. Those are always handled right away. And then just if you have a chance, go through your kids' devices, not just to see what they're doing, but also see what they're communicating with their friends. So if you see that those conversations like you all talked about somebody feeling down or depressed, you can maybe reach out to their parents because maybe their parents aren't checking the devices. And then oftentimes if my child's phone's ringing, with her little friends calling, I'll answer and talk to her friends just to, let them know that I'm watching, but also too, just to see how they're doing too, just to kind of let them know in case somebody does have something they want to say, that there's an adult there that can talk to them.
All right, all very good advice. I know we've talked about resources. Many of you have talked about your phone numbers and ways to get in contact with you. I know at the end of this podcast, we're going to provide a resource page that we plan on distributing and hopefully really plastering all over Sacramento County. I do want to give a really special shout out to the California Grocers Association and Raley's here in Sacramento, because they have really stepped up to help us with this community campaign. We're going to be putting those resource pages really everywhere we can possibly think. But I just want to thank all of you for your dedication on this. We all have the same end game, and that is to protect children. And we all know now more than ever is probably the most challenging times, but we're also, I think, all up for that challenge and your willingness to do this podcast today. So I just want to thank you all. I would also just mention before we end this is that, we'll send this podcast out. Last week, we were able to send out the DV podcast out to 260,000 people via Nextdoor. We'll ask you all to share it with your friends and families and whoever are on your pages, because together, I have no doubt that we can all have some impact during this most difficult time. But again, for the DA's office, thank you. Follow us on Facebook and all of our social media platforms. And just look forward to covering more topics during this time so that we can continue to keep the public informed. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find all of the Justice Journal podcasts on our website at sacda.org, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube.